Okay, good morning, everybody. We're continuing the Talmud Berachos. We're on Yud Tes Amud Aleph, 19a, about 15 lines from the bottom. Continuing with the Mishnah, we're now back into a bit of halacha before we drop back into Agada afterwards. The Mishnah was talking about pallbearers who are carrying the dead and that they would be having replacements. And the question is, who's free, exempt from saying the Shema, who's still obligated to saying the Shema? Because after all, we're involved with the mitzvah of burying the dead, which will take precedence over the mitzvah of saying the Kriya Shema. So the Mishnah was discussing who's obliged. So more now is going to bring up Brisa discussing this. It's a bunch of small pieces, relatively small pieces for the next page or so. So just short ideas. So Tana Rabbanan, the Gemara brings a Brisa, which says, Ein motziin es hameis samach l'kriya shema. We should not take out a dead body for burial when it is close to the time where you have to recite the Shema. For the obvious reason is they're going to miss out on saying the Shema if they're going to be busy with the funeral. Again, just to remind everybody, people might be wondering, what are you talking about? I've been to many funerals. It doesn't take me more than an hour or two. Yeah, but you got to remember, we have all the services provided for us. In the olden days, you had to carry the coffin to where the cemetery was. That could have been quite a distance. Then you had to bury the dead. There was all, they didn't have a machine that did the digging in the ground for you. So there was a lot of work that had to be done. So it took a lot of time. So the Bryce is saying we don't start to take the body out for the burial, let's say early in the morning, unless it's so early that the burial will be all over when it's time to say the Shema. Because we're afraid the burial is going to take longer than expected, and it won't be over until after sunrise, at least, which we know is the optimal time for saying the Shema. Okay, so we don't want that to get misaccording to certain opinions. Also, if the time for saying the Shema has already arrived, the funeral shouldn't begin until we assume that almost everybody has said the Shema. Okay. So then there could be problems with the nighttime Shema. Either way, we don't want to be in a position where one's going to lose out over the other. So you try to make sure you've taken care of all your Shema obligations before you're doing the funeral. But what if now we'd start the funeral, people are going to miss saying the Shema. So you shouldn't take out the dead if that's going to cause that to happen. However, vim hischilu, but what if they already commenced taking the body out for the burial, and you thought it was going to be finished in time for the Shema, and now there's all these, undue delays. I mean, you have stories in the Gemara, for example, where Goyim would attack Jews during a funeral. So you'd have to, defend yourselves. Like, there's a lot of things coming up, wild animals. Like, there's all kinds of things when you're out in the elements burying somebody. No police escorts and things like that. So what if you started the funeral anyway, and it's going to be a problem with some people saying the Shema? So it says, Ein mafsiki, we don't interrupt the burial. Since burying the dead is very important mitzvah, so you should have delayed it, or, should make sure everybody said the Shema first. But if we didn't, so then finish the burial and whatever, people are going to miss the time for the Shema. That's what the Brisa says. So now the Gemara asks, Eini, is this really so? Rabbi Yosef, Apkua, Somach l'Kriya Shema, but Rabbi Yosef, when he died, was taken out for burial very close to the same time of saying the Shema, and that wouldn't necessarily require people to miss out saying the Shema at the right time, and they knew that in advance. So you're supposed to not say it. You're not supposed to take out the dead. You're supposed to say the Shema first. So why did they do that? Risk not saying the Shema? Gemara answers, Adam Chashav Shaini, an important person like Rabbi Yosef, where he was like a Gadol Hador, a great rabbi, that we take exception because it's to honor Hashem. So you have to remember the whole reason we're saying Shema is to show our honor to Hashem. Tzaddik who's dying, that's like one of Hashem's special people. So therefore, for that, we make an exception to show him honor, which is really showing God honor as well. Okay, that's one little piece. Next little piece, the Mishnah continued and said, Shalifnei hamita shalachar mita. So the Mishnah said, both regard to those people in front of the coffin and those who are beyond the coffin, whom that the coffin needs cannot say Shema, whom that the coffin doesn't need, doesn't say the Shema, etc. So now we're on the topic of the funeral. We're going to go on to other topics of the funeral, as it is regarding the obligation of saying the Shema regarding the eulogies. We discussed the obligations, for carrying the coffin. That's only step one of a funeral. There's eulogies. And that means people are, bringing to people to cry and to mourn and that kind of stuff, which is another distinct step of the funeral. So the Brisa says, Ha'oskim behesped, those who are occupied with listening to the eulogies of the deceased. Again, this is something that we're not used to nowadays. Unfortunately, people have their cell phones. And even if you turn off your cell phone at a funeral, you're scrolling through, you're looking at other things. It's very hard for people to pay attention and give respect anymore. I mean, present company excluded, but I'm sure you've been at many funerals where not many people are listening to the eulogies even. And especially eulogies, can go on for hours. Anyway, but the proper way is to be listening and to be crying and mourning together with everybody. So you're a vital part of the funeral. In other words, you could say, well, I don't understand. Let the guy say the eulogy and everybody's going to say Shema during the eulogy. Well, that's not how you do a eulogy, where you're doing other things while the eulogy is happening. So therefore, we're saying when we're involved with the eulogy and there's people listening to the eulogy when the time of the Shema has come, so what does it depend on? Bisman shahamesh mutalafnehem, in the case where the dead person lies before them in the same room where the eulogies are being conducted, or you could say another interpretation is that the body literally lies before them as the eulogies are given. So what do we do? And people have to say the Shema. So this has to be done very subtly. Nishmatin echad vikarim. So people can excuse themselves one at a time and say the Shema. In other words, the problem is you could say, well, listen, I got to say the Shema, so it'll take me a couple minutes. Let me say the Shema while someone's saying the eulogy. But if the dead person's in the room, it's insulting, remember. It's a mockery of the dead for you to do a mitzvah while the dead body is in the room. So therefore, you can one at a time slip out. One person goes out, says the Shema, comes back in. Another person goes out, comes back, says the Shema. That's if the dead person is in the room, and you'd be mocking the person if you said the Shema in front of them. But if but if the dead is not lying before them, so they don't have to leave the room. Let's say the dead person's in another room. You have that at times. Sometimes some synagogues, if there's a funeral for a person, they're not necessarily going to bring the coffin into the synagogue. They're going to leave it outside by the front door or whatever. But there's eulogies going on, but the dead is not in front of them. So then, Hein Yoshim Bakarim, the people who are listening to eulogy can be saying the Shema, but the mourner, Vahu Yoshev Edomim, while the mourner sits quietly because he is excused from saying the Shema, and as we've said, the Onain is excused from all mitzvahs until after the burial. Okay, and then let's continue now. In that case as well, let's say it's not only Shema, but the eulogies are going on for a long time. Haim omdim umispalim, so they stand up and pray. While the mourner stands and acknowledges It says tzedakah then acknowledges God's righteousness of the judgment. And this is the words that he says. We don't do this anymore, although we say a general tzedakah, and as I'll explain in a minute. But the mourner says the following, justifying his judgment. Ribon Halami, master of the universe. Harbe chatasi lefanecha, I have sinned greatly before you. V'lo nifra mimeni echad mine elef, I haven't been punished even 1/1000th of what I deserve to be punished. Therefore, I'm grateful for that, even though the person's close relative has died, but he's saying, you didn't give it to me like I should have had it. It should be your will, Hashem. Tigdor Pirzo say that he should seal our breaches, meaning there should be no more suffering. Upirzos Kalam Chabes Yisrael Barachamim, and all the other breaches shouldn't breach anymore with other Jews, and you should be doing that in mercy. So what the person is saying basically is, although you've given me a very difficult situation to go through now, but looking at the overall picture, you haven't given me nearly as much as I deserve for the things that I've done wrong. To which, and there's a reason why we do not say this prayer. You haven't heard of this prayer. The reason is as follows. Amar Abaye says, no, that's not correct. This point is not a correct thing. Lo miboy leinish lememer hachi. A person should not speak to Hashem in such a manner, saying that he's been punished less than he deserves. As Rashi says, you'll see shortly, it's like he's almost asking for more punishment. Why? Here we have a famous statement coming up now. Damar Rabbi Shul ben Levi, because Rabbi ben Lakish, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, Rish Lakish, V'chein Tana Mishmeida Rabbi Yossi, and similar is taught in the name of Rabbi Yossi, La'olam al yiftach adam piv l'satan. A person should never give Satan an opening. That's what it literally means. The piv, the mouth of Satan, you should never open up his mouth, meaning to say, don't give Satan an excuse to have more prosecution in the heavenly courts by saying you should get more of a punishment. In other words, Satan and Shamayim, remember, the Yetzer Hara and Satan of the Malach HaMavis, they all are the same entity. They just are three different corporate names. So the Yetzer Hara gets you to Averis. Then you do the Averis, unfortunately. Then he prosecutes against you. And then after the prosecution, if his prosecution wins, then he can bring punishment to you. So if Satan, you've done Averis, he's prosecuting. So Hashem, of course, is long and merciful. He doesn't want to hear the prosecution or doesn't want to act on the prosecution. But now you hear a Jew saying, boy, I sure deserve to get more than what I've gotten. Well, then the son, see, he himself says he deserves more. So it's kind of you're opening up the mouth for the prosecution. And there is such a concept. Al tiftach pel l'satan. That's what we call it. Don't open up. Don't say those kinds of things. We don't talk about, don't say, if I would die now, I would want to die this way and this way. Don't say those words. Don't talk that kind of talk, because our words are powerful. Just, when we say good words, they're very powerful. And negative words, even though it's not like you want it to happen, but the way you word things seem to imply things. So you don't give any openings up for the Satan. Now, it wasn't just that Rabbi Yossi just made up this idea, but Amar Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yosef, not Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yosef says, Ma'akra. What's the pasuk that supports this idea that you don't give an opening up for Satan? Shenemar, it says in the book of Isaiah, it says, Kimat kistom hayinu. It means, had not Hashem left us as a remnant, talking about the Jewish people now, Hashem, as much as we've suffered, he's let us remain. We've had devastations, but we still always somehow hang on and remain. He leaves enough of us to continue the Jewish people. But had Hashem not left us as a remnant, we would almost been like stone. meaning would have been utterly destroyed. So that's what people were saying. People were saying. So Maya Harulam, and what does the Navi say as a rejoinder to that pasuk? How does he respond to the people? He says, Shimuna Dvar Hashem Kitsine Stone. Hear the words of Hashem, O chiefs of stone. So by saying, we deserve punishment like the Sodomites of old, so that gives the Navi to give an opening to label them as people like stone. If you're comparing yourself like stone, then you're going to be compared to stone. So therefore, we don't do that. And what we say makes a difference. That's the point. If we speak negatively about ourselves, it gives an opening for the prosecution. And we say, really, we're as bad as Sodomites. So you're as bad as Sodomites? Okay, so we'll treat you like Sodomites. So one has to be careful. There's a lot of psychology to this besides just good old-fashioned words. Remember, we had a whole discussion that a tzaddik, when he makes a curse even on condition, and the condition doesn't come true, it isn't fulfilled, still the curse can come true. Got to be careful what comes out of your mouth, because it's listened to very carefully. You shouldn't even be close to saying that I deserve to get so many punishments. There's other ways of wording things. You could always say, I'm very grateful to the way you treat me, Hashem. And I know you always treat me with kindness and compassion. That's a nice thing to say. But to say, boy, I really deserve to get it really bad, and I'm lucky you didn't give it to me. That's not the kind of talk you say. You don't say, well, if Hashem didn't help us, we'd be just like Sodomites. Meaning to say we sin as bad as Sodomites. We deserve the punishment. We don't say those kinds of things. Number one, the words make an impact. But number two, it has a psychological impact on yourself. If you really think you deserve to get so much punishment, then that doesn't do good for your self-esteem. I am such a rush, I deserve to get so much, this and that. You could be humble. And say, I'm not such a big Talmud Chacham as you think I am. Yes, there's place to say that. Or you could say, whatever I have is because Hashem helps me. But to say I deserve more suffering, that's not, because then you start believing it. And you start believing it, then your service of Hashem doesn't work out as well. Okay. Next mini topic, the Mishnah continues. Okay, we dealt with carrying the coffin. We dealt with the eulogies. Now we're going back from the funeral. Kavra sameis v'chazru, after having buried the dead and they return. Then the Gemara says, if they're able to complete the Shema now, begin and complete before the mourner reaches the row where the people are lined up to give the consolation, they can. But if there's not enough time, then they do not begin to say the Shema. So now the Gemara is going to point out, it appears to be a contradiction in the Mishnah. The Mishnah starts off by saying, it appears, it says, if they're able to begin and complete all of it, that's what it said, then they should begin and complete it. And if not, not. So it means, okay, if I can begin and complete it, yes, I should recite the Shema. Implying, it said, if I can begin and complete, implying avo perik echad, but what if I only have enough time to say one section of the Shema? Or pasuk echad, or I only could say one pasuk of the Shema, implying I shouldn't begin, because the Mishnah said if you could start and complete, implying only if you can do that. But if I only do a little bit, I shouldn't. But for a minhu, but now I'm going to ask you a question by a brisa, not the Mishnah, but another source, a brisa that says, Kavra esameis, when they bury the dead, v'chazru, now they're returning. Im yecholim lahaschel v'ligmor, if they can begin and finish, afilu perik echad o pasuk echad. If they can finish even only one chapter or one pasuk, they should do so. So it appears you don't have to have time to say the entire Shema. So the direct brisa that says everything says you don't have to have time to finish the whole thing, and you could start. The Mishnah says you have time to finish the whole thing. Start and finish, you should start, which implied if you can't do the whole thing, you shouldn't start. So the Gemara, it seems to be a contradiction. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a contradiction. Hachinami kamar. Really what the Mishnah is saying as well, and should be understood. You have to add a little meaning to the context of the Mishnah. It says, "Im yichom lahaskol v'ligmor," if you're able to be complete, and what has to be implied is afilu perek echad o afilu pasuk echad, even one chapter or one verse, ad shelo yagiel l'shir, before they come to your spot in the row, yaschilu, you can begin. Because remember, on a biblical level, we've already said, even if you say the first pasuk, you bidyevet ar yotze, okay, or since the last pasuk of the Shema paragraph also affirms, the first verse rather affirms Hashem's unity, etc., etc. So that's okay. And if not, if they can't even do one pasuk, they shouldn't begin. So we have to just read into what the Mishnah says. When it says you can begin and finish, it didn't necessarily say what to begin and finish. So we could say that since we have a brisa that says even if you can begin and finish on a little bit, so we don't want to make the Mishnah contradict the brisa. We could say that's what the Mishnah meant, but it said it shortly. If you could begin and say the Shema, meaning the most important part of the Shema, which would be either a sentence or a paragraph, that is fine. And with that, we finish Yud Tes Amud Aleph. And now we go to the top of Yud Tes Amud Beis. The Mishnah continued by talking about Ha'omdim Beshura. It says those that are actually standing in the row to offer consolation. So the Mishnah, just repeating the Mishnah, it says the inner ones, meaning, remember, there's layers of rows. So the people in the inner row, and that means the mourner are seeing them directly, and they're speaking directly to the mourner. So those in the inner row, if there's no time, they're exempt from saying Shema. Well, those in the outer rows are obliged to say Shema. So the exemption is for those in the inner rows. Okay, that's what the Mishnah says. Tana Rabbah. Gemara quotes a brisa which elaborates on this short statement of the Mishnah. It says, Shura haroa pnima patura. Those standing in a row with the view inside, where the mourners are standing, they are exempt from the Shema. And the commentaries, Rashi explains, meaning the people in the two innermost rows, those in the front row who have a totally unobstructed view of the mourners, and those in the second row because they can look in between the shoulders of the people in front of them. So even if you're in the second, like at a wedding, a lot of times by the dancing, people are lined up. So there's people in the inner row, they can see everything. The second row, you can still see through the shoulders. But by the third row, you can't see anything because you got shoulders and people, everybody in between. So those who are in the inner rows are exempt from the Shema. And those who cannot see the inner row, they are exempt because they can't talk to the mourners anyway, so there's no reason to exempt them. Now, that's opinion number one. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, he doesn't make this discrimination. He says those people who came on account of the mourner, in other words, they came mamish to comfort him, piturim, they're exempt. But machmas atzman chayavim. But if they came on their own account just to see the burial, they're obliged to say the Shema. So now it's not clear how is Rabbi Yehuda differing and what's the distinction. So there's a machlokas in the Rishonim. One opinion holds that Rabbi Yehuda means to limit the exemption said by the Tanna Kama, meaning limiting to those people even in the inner row, only who really came to comfort the mourners, rather than those who are just coming to be there for whatever reason, curiosity or covet a mace or whatever. So some say it's a machlokas even for those in the inner row, if everyone in the inner row has to say it. Another view, Rabbi Yehuda means to expand the exemption by the Tanna Kama, and it extends to people even in the outer rows, but they're coming to comfort the mourners, but they're not just there to see. In other words, sometimes people come maybe out of respect, but it's not that they're really close to the mourners. Again, when you get comfort from somebody, who do you usually feel comforted by? People who are your close friends. Your close friends, they give you words of comfort, you feel comforted. Then you see this guy comes, you don't even know who he is. or maybe you know him, but he's not a friend of yours. So why is he there? Well, I came to be there. I came to hear the eulogies. Big rabbis were saying eulogies. I want to hear. You can imagine if let's say I'm giving an example. Let's say you were a person was related to the chief rabbi of Israel, and the chief rabbi of Israel heard that you died, and he's coming to give a eulogy for you. Whoa! So a lot of people are going to be in the funerals because they want to hear the chief rabbi give a eulogy. They don't come for the dead person. I'm just giving you an example where you could be at a funeral and you're not really there to comfort the mourners, but you're being there just to be at the funeral. So it's a machlokas to what extent he is giving exemptions for. Okay, end of that small little sugya. Okay, now we begin a little bit of a lengthier sugya that's going to take us all the way to the bottom and beyond. So now we'll just start to get a running jump. We only have a few minutes, but let's start a brand new topic within this. Amar Yehuda Marav. Yehuda Marav says, Hamotzi kilayim bebigdo. Totally switching around. A person discovers he has shatnez in his clothing. Okay, which we know, Doraisa, you're not allowed to wear shatnez, a mixture of wool and linen. Okay, now remember, we're not talking about, let's say you have a jacket. You have a shirt, a tie, a jacket, and my jacket has shatnez. Let's say in the middle of Bathurst Street on Yontif, and for some reason you finally decide to look inside the lapel, and inside the lapel says 50% wool, 50% linen. Okay, you can't wear it. You got to take it off. Okay, so you take off your jacket. You still got a shirt, you got a coat, whatever, you got things on. But what if the garment is like you're wearing one garment? It's like your toga, okay? And your toga is all full of shatnez. Now you take off the toga, you don't got any clothes on. And we're going to say, well, wait till I get home. Well, you get home, it could be 20 minutes till you get home. Every minute you're wearing shatnez is an avera. That's the situation over here. So you realize that you have shatnez. Your friend says, oh, you're going with that designer toga. Do you know it's made in Taiwan? And the rabbi said they're all full with mixture of wool and linen. And then you pick up the label. See, right here, it says 50% wool, 50% linen. You're wearing shatnez. So look what the Rabbi Yehuda Marav says. You got to remove the garment, even in the middle of the marketplace, even though you're going to be quite embarrassed. My time, what's the reason? Fascinating idea. There's a pasuk in Mishlei that says, Ein chachma ve'ein tfuna ve'ein eitza l'neged Hashem. There's no wisdom or understanding or counsel when it's weighed against the honor of Hashem. In other words, when we talk about Hashem's honor, that takes precedence, and now that's the pasuk, and now you see how Rabbi Yehuda Marav explains it. Kol makom sheyesh chilul Hashem, wherever there's a desecration of Hashem's name, okay, or a threat of the desecration of His name, ein chokin kavod l'rav. We don't give respect even to a teacher. As it says, ein chachma ve'ein tfuna ve'ein eitza. Even if the person possesses wisdom and understanding, etc., doesn't matter. So what's the pasuk teaching us? That although there's in general, we say, for example, a student isn't permitted to render a legal decision in front of his teacher. Okay, he's not allowed to do that. But let's say the teacher is ruling in a way that's a chilul Hashem. Forget about a garment right now. You're not supposed to question your rabbi. You're not allowed to render a decision for a rabbi. If your rabbi's in the room and you're a student, you don't render decisions or anything. But let's say, whatever, the rabbi's make a big mistake, it's going to be a big chilul Hashem. And you have to stop a chilul Hashem. So we have to do that. So that's the basic pshat of the pasuk. More generally, we derive from this pasuk that considerations of human dignity cannot weigh against the desecration of God's name that results from transgressing one of His commandments. Therefore, upon discovering a forbidden mixture of wool and linen, you have to immediately take off the garment despite the embarrassment that is there.
You can obviously tell that it's shatnez?
We know for sure it's shatnez. We're not saying the guy didn't check it at the shatnez lab, because then we don't know for sure. If you say, did you get your jacket checked for Shabbos? No. Okay, he says, I'd recommend you go home, change, and go get it checked, because we don't know for sure it is. But if we know for sure 100% it is Shabbos, it's not a question, it is Shabbos. And just look how the note of Yehuda says as well. He proves that in the context of Gemara, transgression of a Torah prohibition is considered a desecration of God's name, even when done in private. Because maybe nobody knows it's Shabbos, but you know it's Shabbos. So therefore, now again, I don't want to end today with us just saying, oh, now we're going to start throwing rocks at secular Jews who are driving in Meir Sharim and this and that, because, it's Chil Hashem, this and that. Okay, we're going to have to discuss more tomorrow, because there could be bigger Chil Hashems, there could be levels of Chil Hashem, okay? I would not recommend for you today, if you see a woman wearing clothes that you know are Shabbos, to strip her of her clothes would not be a good idea. It would be a bigger Chil Hashem in the newspapers to say an Orthodox Jew went and stripped a woman from her clothes because of his religion. Be bigger Chil Hashem. So we have to understand everything in its correct context, okay? We're talking about, in a Haredi neighborhood, everybody's Haredi and this and that, where it won't cause a bigger Chil Hashem. So again, this kind of case in contemporary society, we'd have to look at it a lot differently, because unfortunately, greater Chil Hashems can come from that. And Tony Simcover, so to distinguish between the two Tonys we have, asked me a very good question over the weekend regarding how do we know when the rabbis are telling us things that, that they're to get versus medical opinion and this and that, which was a very good question. And how do rabbis really come to conclusions of how to render decisions? So part of that is Chil Hashem. So although, maybe the halacha would be A, but Chil Hashem might cause us, but if you do A, it causes a Chil Hashem, then you got to maybe do something else. So there's levels of Chil Hashem. So yes, a person desecrating Hashem's name is a Chil Hashem, no question about it. And we have to stop it. But if the way we stop it will create a greater Chil Hashem, then you haven't gained anything, and everything, you've made it worse. So you have to understand the context of this Gemara will be in a case where, imagine your mom is in the middle of Bnei Brak, and everybody's a Haredi, and everybody understands what Shabbos is, and everybody understands you're not supposed to do an Avera, and the person's got Shabbos right there, then yeah, we'd have to strip them off, because everybody understands why that's happening, and there isn't going to be any bigger Chil Hashem. But in our context, it would be much different. This will be continued tomorrow. We've just begun the subject. So we'll be happy to deal with more questions on this topic tomorrow. Okay. Have a good day. Enjoy the pouring rain. Reminds me of a song from about 50 years ago called Laughter in the Rain. So let's laugh at the rain and maybe even go out for a little walk. Reindeer. All right.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Have a good day, Rabbi. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.